I kind of had a feeling after they went and watched Romeo and Juliet that this was going to be the direction they would end up taking Sarasa, but either way, still turning out to be a fantastic route to take the character. But this is my impressions on episode 6 of Kageki Shojo, so let's jump right into it. As the episode opens up, we catch all the girls essentially complaining about the fact that their routine for schooling is kind of dull, and they don't really feel like they're doing much that you would expect to be doing when you're trying to learn stage play. And as we find out, when basically Sarasa suggests is, well, why don't we just ask Ando if we can do something different? And they're like, you're crazy. But sure enough, while they're in class, she ends up standing up and asking Ando, essentially, can we do something that is actual stage acting? Like, can we try out our actual art? And the funny thing that comes from this is he's like, well, she says each one of these different teachers are all telling us to express ourselves, and she does it in different ways. And when he asks, well, if you could do it in a great way that I would say it, I'll consider it. And she, sure enough, she does a whole thing with her ear and express yourself. He doesn't like it, unfortunately. But yeah, what pretty much comes from this is, following this, we end up finding out that it's actually Sarasa's birthday. It's her 16th birthday. Everybody's really shocked by that. She had a gift waiting for her, and it's a bunch of roses. And everybody's like, oh, is it from your boyfriend? She's like, it might be. The card's apparently doesn't even have a name on it. But we end up finding out, of course, it is a friend of hers who somehow is connected to her boyfriend, apparently her current boyfriend. I didn't really know if that's what they were establishing at this point, with that it was her boyfriend. But obviously people from her hometown that she's left behind. But yeah, that was kind of cute because obviously now you have Eyes being very jealous. This being her first friend, she wants to outdo this frog. His Twitter profile's a frog. So she ends up getting this really cool little figure that she really likes. So that was really cute. Just seeing Ai being very jealous and wanting to kind of outdo everybody else for her first friend is they're starting to tug at my heartstrings for Ai. She's actually very sweet now. But yeah, following this, we of course have Ando come up and say, yeah, okay, I pushed for you guys. I got you essentially the chance that you want. You will do a stage play of Romeo and Juliet, and you have to do your own practice on the side. I don't have any curriculum for you. You'll do your own study groups together. You'll form groups, and in 2 weeks you will perform. And I'll do some criticism of what you're doing, and you can basically learn from that. So obviously upsetting to them because they wanted to do it during class, but at least they have the opportunity to actually perform and have him watch it and give them obvious feedback. So yeah, and as you would have it, sure enough, Sarasa and I end up in the same group. They're also matched with, I think it was Chaika, one of the twins, as well as Hoshino, who is obviously the granddaughter and daughter of a performer before from Revue. So yeah, that was interesting little pairing up, and obviously they choose who's going to be in each role. Sarasa is going to be Tybalt, Hoshino is going to be Romeo, and then it did seem like Sawada was going to become the role of Juliet, but then she kind of gives up to Ai, which I'm curious what that was, if it's just that she doesn't have enough self-confidence in herself, or that she just felt that she didn't want to take it from Ai, that obviously everybody would want Ai to be Juliet. But then it kind of shows her see her sister become Juliet, and she's a little bit upset by that. But they still do some practicing. They end up getting pushed out by Nojima, that she doesn't want her doing their practice inside of the tatami room, whatever that means. She's kind of just mean. So they have to find a place to do that. And it was interesting because at this point we kind of find out, because Hoshino kind of gets upset at them, how they're not doing a good job. And she kind of storms out, and then we find out later when I confronts her, like, you're kind of like somebody that I work with in JPX. I think that's going to be a common thread throughout the entire series, is somebody does something wrong, I comes up and says, I've seen this in JPX before. It's like everybody, like you're going to have somebody that's involved with drugs or something. I've seen somebody in GPX that was involved in drugs. But anyways, it was cool because I doesn't really find offense in Hoshino. She actually supports her way of thinking. Like, she says, we need somebody that can get mad at us in order to push us forward. Seeing it as a positive, which I do, I technically agree with I in this regard. I think there's a point in which it becomes toxic and more damaging than useful, but there is something to be said about having somebody that's strong enough to say, look, we're friends, but push. And that is a good thing. But yeah, she's like, I don't want to become the bad guy. You're kind of putting a lot of pressure on me. But it was kind of interesting also because we find out that you kind of mentioned to her, it wasn't that I was messing up because of Sarasa. I was messing up because I missed a lot of school, and which we know why. It's obvious the whole thing that happened with her and her I don't know, stepfather, I don't know what you'd want to call him. And obviously JPX probably brought her out of schooling as well. But she never learned kanji. So this is something that she has to fight with. And she obviously starts learning kanji and at least translating and figuring it out in order to learn her lines. At the same time, Sarasa ends up getting a copy of the Romeo and Juliet play, and then she kind of watches that play that way, which is, again, gets into where I was actually thinking this was going to end up going, because as they do the performance, there's obviously issues that each one of them end up having. Hoshino's too busy looking at Ando to look for approval or what his expression is. So obviously she's too focused on him as an audience. And that's the same problem that Ai has. She's too busy looking at Ando. And the reason why Ai is doing is because she was taught as an idol at JPX is to perform for your audience. And he was the audience, which makes sense. This is what she's used to. This is what she was refined to do. And that's what idols do, is they perform to the people, which isn't necessarily what you should do in a play. As he says, you leave yourself behind when you enter the stage. You are now this character, and there's no audience. You just act. And you do it the best way you can. Sawada, unfortunately, has a lot of flubs. She's supposed to be this old lady, and yet she's very spry for an old lady. She kind of just runs out there. He says basically, hunching over does not make you an old lady. You have to make the character. And then obviously, again, Sarasa steps up, and she does an amazing job. Everybody's impressed. Everybody's shocked. But, like I said, I was kind of assuming this is the direction it was going to go. He says, as you are now, you will never be a top idol or a top performer. You're never going to be a part of this. As you are now, what you are doing, you will never make it. And like I said, I think the direction that they're going with this is that she's a copycat. And that was, again, something that I got a hint of when they went and watched the Romeo and Juliet play. She came out and she knocked it out of the park. She watched the play one time, and then suddenly she was acting it perfectly. And what happened in this episode? She got this DVD, or this Blu-ray actually, and she watches this play, and she does the performance perfect. But, and I think this is what they're going to end up getting into. I don't think it's a thing where he's like, you're too tall or anything. Because obviously he says it in a way that says, as you are now, you will not be. So he's leaving it open. Like, you can become one. You can correct this. He's leaving it open. It's not you're too tall. It's not that you have a stature that's incorrect. It's not that you're not what we need. It is that what you're doing now is incorrect. And what that will end up being, I'm pretty much 99.99% sure, is that she's a copycat. And if you think it in the terms of this review, is they've already mentioned the idea there's 4 seasons. Each season has a group, and there's only a room for one person per role in each of these seasons. So each role will take 4 people. And if she wants to become, say, Romeo of Summer, she cannot act like Romeo of Spring. She cannot watch Spring's Romeo, copy him, and then perform up there exactly like that. Because what will happen? Nobody's going to come to see her in Summer. They're going to watch the person that was the original. And they're going to see her as a copy. And as we mentioned before, when we were talking about the whole situation with the Purging Girl, I'm calling her Purging Girl, with Yamada, what they say? That they have females that are watching, and they are sharp-eyed. And they will know that Sarasa is a copy. And then she will never get that role because of that. They're never going to give her that role to begin with, because they're going to know that's going to happen. So that's what I think they're going to get into, is essentially, Sarasa, you're amazing. You put on such a great performance, but it's not your performance, and you will have to be somebody else. Now, granted, for me, personally, I don't see this a thing. I think the idea of acting out a role, unless they get into some idea where each of these performers are making their own thing, which I don't think so. If they're so dead set on the idea that these women are so sharp-eyed that they would criticize things like that, they wouldn't want somebody to go out there and act their own Romeo. There is no Susie Romeo. There is no Mary Romeo. There is Romeo. And I think if somebody were to go up there and yeah, I guess the idea you could have somebody make it their own, but they're performing a role of a character. And if they suddenly start doing ballerina as Romeo, yeah, that's unique, but that's not Romeo. So it is it is one of those conundrums that I often see in these kinds of stories where somebody's amazing, but they're a copy. It's like, well, who would see that? Like, obviously, who would really criticize that? If you went up there and watched her perform, you're going to say that she did an amazing job. Yeah, you might see that it's similar to somebody else, but that's exactly what they're doing with their character. It's cool, but at the same time, I do see some flaws in that whole kind of storytelling. It is something that is quite frequently used in a lot of shows, and I hope they do something interesting with it with Sarasa. It's not to say they can't do something interesting with it, because this show has proven that this writer knows how to write these character stories. They know how to write fantastic drama beats, and I'm sure they'll do something amazing with Sarasa, even if it is a copy story. I forgot to mention, Hoshino's reason for getting kind of outburst before was they were suggesting the idea of actually practicing on the sidewalk, and that was another one of those moments where you kind of know where Hoshino's coming from. Like, you can't. Well, this is a very prestigious school. You can't just go, act out and practice on a sidewalk. That would look extremely bad for the school. Like, what, they don't have rooms that these people can practice in? Wait, this is the caliber of stuff they have going? There's so many negatives that can come from that, just practicing on the sidewalk, which is sad, but at the same time, it is reality. Fantastic episode. Really did love it. Continuing to love this series. Looking forward to more of it. Hope you guys enjoyed my impressions of episode 6 of Kageki Shojo. If you did, please leave a like down below, comment, let me know what you thought of the episode. Share this video if you can, and consider supporting us on Patreon if you can. And y'all take care.